Okay, guys, today we're going to go over some collaborative learning techniques. So active learning is one of the most important practices that a tutor can employ because it keeps students engaged. So just remember those questions, questions, questions. Always ask your students questions, ensuring that they are engaged throughout the session. Puts the student in the center of the learning process. So rather the focus being on the instructor and having them talk the entire time, you want to make sure that you are actively having the students engaged in the center of that learning process. The goal is to find out how much students know and oversee their growth and progress. So, kind of when they enter that session, you want to gauge how much they know, and then you want to make sure that you are facilitating active learning to kind of see their process of growing and becoming independent learners. So some benefits of active learning. So it promotes higher level thinking and critical thinking. So rather than the students just having being passive receivers of information, they are having to actively think about what content they are consuming and critically think about it. Student learning increases, so that's kind of a given. They are learning more through active learning rather than passive learning, and it increases retention and class attendance. So, some important characteristics of active learning. So, participants work in small groups to learn course content. So, rather than having kind of a lecture style, the participants are going to be able to break off into smaller groups to learn this content and maybe like participate in activities to help them understand the content a little more. So, tutors are going to avoid re-lecturing. So, you don't just want to do a repeat of their class. That content can kind of, they've already seen that content, it gets redundant. They're not there to relearn the content, they're there to kind of make that connection onto what they're missing. Participants do most of the talking during the sessions. So you want to kind of put the focus on the participants and the students. You want to make sure that they are actively communicating what they are learning and what they are having problems with. Tutors redirect questions back to participants to answer. So, say a student has a question, you could be like, oh, that's a good question. Does anybody know the answer? Or have built-in questions in your lesson to ask them and to have them kind of complete and make sure that they are paying attention as well. Tutors do opening activities to make participants comfortable. So that's kind of like an icebreaker situation, whether that be like, in the beginning of a session, have everyone introduce themselves and state like their major, or if you have like kind of an exit ticket or an entrance ticket, sorry, you can have them answer a question based off the subject and kind of share answers in small groups just to kind of make everybody comfortable and kind of do like a little warm up. Tutors ensure that all participants benefit from session by ensuring that everyone participates. So that's a big thing. You might have a session where certain students are participating more than others, or somebody doesn't want to participate at all. Kind of just make sure that everybody is participating, whether that be in like the small group or answering questions. Maybe if you notice they aren't participating, call on them specifically, just to make sure that everybody is benefiting from active learning. So we have our task identification. So you're going to explain the activity. You're going to make sure that you give clear instructions to students before placing them into the groups. So if you place them into the groups first, they kind of get like into their group and they're not really paying attention because they're talking to their group. You want to make sure that they know what to do before they get into the groups. And then you're going to give examples of like either complete work or kind of like how to start the process. And then you want to make sure that you set time limits. So large group activities should not last more than 10 to 15 minutes. Those time limits are really important because you want to make sure that you don't want to go over on time for your session and you want to make sure that you are optimizing your time. So for group formation, you can use two different methods for selecting groups. You can do random selection where you count off. Maybe if you wanted to go around the room and do one, two, three, four, or if you want to go around the room and just tell them you're in this group, you're in this group, or you can base them off of the location of seats. So if they're all sitting in groups already, you can just automatically do those groups. That happens tends to be with they're with their friends, so they might have an easier time talking or they might get off task. It just depends. And then purposeful selection. So these are going to be predetermined based off of individual skills and abilities. So say you have like somebody who's struggling a little bit more, you might not want to group them with somebody else who's struggling a little bit more because they're not really going to have an easier time to like understand. But you also don't want to group them with somebody who has like a upper level of knowledge because it feels like the person with the upper level of knowledge is just going to be teaching the person with the lower level of knowledge. So you have to know your students for that based off of their skills and abilities, and you can do that before your session to ensure that they are going to be productive in those groups. You also want to ensure that groups are seated in an arrangement to encourage discussion and interaction. So you want to make sure they're kind of all facing each other, whether that be like at the table or if they're standing. That way they can all kind of collaborate and nobody is left out. Mm. So for group size, the average small group is 3 to 6 students. 3 to 4 students encourages interaction, so involvement decreases as the group grows. So for a small group thing, you want to make sure that this would be kind of for a larger discussion, so students actually interact with each other and kind of everybody gets a chance to speak. 5 to 6 students ensures diversity of perspectives, but some students might not participate. So it's easier for a student to not get involved because other students are talking or if they're kind of being like spoken over. So you just want to kind of gauge that based off of the students that you have and the activity that you have for them. So for collective responsibility, it encourages everyone to introduce themselves, so gets everyone to speak, and then monitor groups to ensure everyone is participating. So you want to make sure that during your session, you want everybody to speak, whether that be you ask a question and you have everyone answer it, or in the group, you want to make sure that you're monitoring them and ensuring that like one person's not just sitting out and not talking, and that everyone kind of gets their fair share of talking and are all collaborating with each other. So your role as the tutor, you want to float between groups to answer questions, listen to discussion, and offer support. So, like I said, walk around the classroom, kind of see which groups or maybe if there's one struggling or you hear something good that they say, you want to maybe support that a little bit. Listen to all their discussions and make sure they're on the right track. You want to ensure all groups stay focused and that they understand the expectations for activity. So, once again, make sure that they're all on task and on track for the activity that you have for them. Okay, so now we're going to go over utilizing technology in tutoring sessions. So, why use technology? It can be an engaging supplement because it can easily be used to group students together and get quick feedback. It makes tutoring fun, so kind of like an interactive situation with that active learning. You want to make sure that you're not just lecturing, and you can include like videos and games through technology. And it can take the burden off of tutors because you don't have to plan out a whole paper assignment, and you don't have to like with videos, you don't have to sit there and talk. The videos can explain it a little bit. So use of videos. So videos are highly encouraged because they can enhance the session and act as motivation to learn. So you may want to use any clip of or video that the instructor uses. That's really good because it'll reinforce that learning that they learned in the class, and you know for sure that it's on par for the class. So at the end of the session, you can also recommend videos for students to view after the session. So say you found like a really cool video on YouTube that kind of supports their learning and their thinking and what they're learning for that class, then you can recommend that to them and maybe send out a link so they can watch that after the session. So for PowerPoint presentations can be used to introduce concepts while providing an opportunity for engagement by using bulleted information and images designed to compare and contrast key ideas or concepts. So PowerPoints are really useful. We use them all the time in our sessions. You want to have a lot of like images on your PowerPoint or key concepts or ideas. It's just easier for visual learners to see that on the PowerPoint rather than just being spoken the information to them. Also, Kahoot, and like other app, there are other apps, but Kahoot is an effective tool because it combines the use of phones with quick Q&As. So the anonymous aspect of Kahoot has been shown to increase overall participation. So whenever you start the Kahoot up, you can have them put in like fake names or nicknames. That way they don't feel a lot of pressure to get things right, and they don't feel like people are going to judge them for getting their answers wrong. And then are there any other apps that you use in the session that are helpful that you use to quiz or do an activity maybe? Okay. So procedures for cell phone use. So this is kind of important because you don't want your students to be off topic, but also you want to make sure that they are using their cell phones for certain things like Kahoot or any interactive things during the lesson. So for the start of the session, make sure you are kind of doing that taking out and putting away device kind of routine. Maybe if they come in you don't want their cell phones out, be like, make sure you guys are putting away your devices. We don't need them for this session. And then you want to establish clear rules for appropriate cell phone use at the beginning of the session. So once again, when they're coming in, tell them they don't need their device for the session, and if it could be put away. That way they are fully engaged and are not tempted to get out their cell phone. So once again, establishing these boundaries can ensure minimal distractions. You want to be clear on when cell phone use is appropriate. So, for example, the Kahoot and other apps, you may have like them scan a QR code, or you may have them use Kahoot or any other kind of app, and that is completely acceptable and appropriate cell phone use. There we go. Thank you.